Hi everyone. So with GitLab 13, we're switching from defaulting to a single Sidekiq process to Sidekiq clusters, which allows you to have multiple Sidekiq processes for however you define the queues. So I wanted to go into what that means, what it looks like if you use the old config, and what are the use cases for actually using multiple Sidekiq processes. Great. So let's get started. So here I have a new GitLab 13 instance I just set up. And if we look at, well, I guess first let's check GitLab CTL status. And we can see, if we call it Sidekiq, even though it's actually Sidekiq clusters, if we look in PS, we can see, spell things right. Here we can see run SV, logd, and then here we have, we're running the Sidekiq cluster binary here. And then here's the actual Sidekiq process. You can see it runs kind of heavy, and it's and all the queues it's got. Okay, yeah. Let's just see out of curiosity how many threads it has. So 69 threads. Okay, so that's a fair amount. They're probably not all worker threads. And for comparison, here is a 1210 instance with both the regular Sidekiq and Sidekiq clusters as they're set up before. So you can see here we have Sidekiq and then we have Sidekiq cluster. And if we check PS, so you've got, here's our original Sidekiq process. Here is our Sidekiq cluster process. And here are the Sidekiq cluster processes for the extra queues I've defined in my setup. So if we look in the old GitLab RB, so from the 1210, see you've got Sidekiq cluster enabled, and then here are my queue groups, process commit and post receive is one group, so that's one process, and then GitLab shell is the second process. And that lines up with what we see here. We've got process commit post receive and GitLab shell. And then you can see this 0 of 3 is the number of worker threads. So you can tell that we have, it's number of queues plus 1 up to a limit. So we have 2 queues here, so we go up to 3 threads, 1 queue here, so we go up to 2 threads. Back on 13, I think we're just running out of space here to print all the queues. But presumably, actually, let's check this. So if we do PS 54345, 5435. What is that? 13 threads. Yeah, so there's always some amount of overhead of extra threads that aren't actually doing all the work. So that's good to know. So presumably don't actually have 60 worker threads. Maybe it's an extra 11 threads. We can check the other worker thread 433. 14. Okay. Yeah, so maybe it's an extra 11 threads. So if that's the case, we have 69 here, be 58 threads total working. That's interesting. Okay, yeah. Here we have it in the UI. So let's go in and add some extra queue processes or Sidekiq cluster processes. So you have Sidekiq queue groups. You can add multiple. I'll do here. I'll make this one kind of a catch-all. So we've got one process for GitLab shell and post receive, 2 more that just do GitLab shell, and then this one that does everything else. Just as a note, you can have multiple workers handling a single queue if that queue gets out of control. So if you have some kind of edge case with the customer where they have a job that's taking 5 minutes to run and it's just sandbagging their Sidekiq instance, you can set up multiple extra processes to run just that queue. So that things continue to move along, up to the limit of what they can support on their server. So reconfigure. Okay, so now we have our Sidekiq Cluster process, and then here we have one process that does GitLab shell. Another one does GitLab shell. GitLab shell. Where's the post receive? Oh, here it is. Yeah, post receive too. GitLab shell, post receive, GitLab shell, and then all the queues. Okay. So if we refresh here, hopefully this will reflect. Yeah, it's not showing up. It might take a minute for that to come in. Okay. Just out of curiosity, let's see. Process ID is that 3424110. 32410. There we go. Seems low. Yeah, actually, it's right here in the args. So C is concurrency level. So here we've set a concurrency of 3. Here's a concurrency of 2, right? So 2 threads. Here we've set it to 50. Maybe they're still being spawned. Let's check again. Still at 7. 32410. Interesting. Let's give it a minute to come up. Still not showing up there yet. Okay. All right, what else can we check? We can go over here. 1210 box. Yeah, all right, so we've got that. If we look at the number of threads on the actual Sidekiq process for comparison, we got 44 threads there. Okay, so apparently the overhead is not consistent. So that's probably closer to 50 on the original Sidekiq cluster process. All right, let's see if this is coming up yet. No, not yet. Still only 7 threads. See, they're also taking up a fair amount of compute here. All 4 of these processes are hitting 44% load. Yeah, this is a 2-core box, and our load is now up to 4.4. So this is pretty heavy. So that's certainly not helping anything. Fair amount of memory available though. Let's give this chance one more chance to come up. Still not showing up. All right, I'm going to cut down the number of processes because this is getting pretty hard for this little computer. Okay. Great. So now we see we have our 2 processes, one for GitLab shell and post receive, the other for everything else. And this one has concurrency 50. So let's just check. Through 7. Still only 7. That is interesting. Maybe that's the maximum concurrency. I don't know how that works in Sidekiq. I know that in the GitLab RB, you can set minimum and max concurrency. We talk about that in the docs. Or previously, it would be, here is your concurrency, and it was just 25 or 50 or whatever. And now we can say, down here, we can have either n+1 if it's in that range, or the min or max value. So let's see. Min concurrency is 0. So we haven't defined that. But it's always going to be n+1. Okay. Let's see if background jobs is updated. The processes yet. There we go. Okay. So now we see that we've got this process 835 that has the 2 queues and 837 that has everything else. All right. So what if we get rid of the catch-all? What happens? So now we have one queue group, just with GitLab shell and post receive. And let's make a second one for the sake of argument with process commit. Okay, so we've got 2 workers, concurrency 3, concurrency 2 for GitLab shell post receive and process commit. All right, so none of them are catch-alls. So what happens if we run a job that's not in those queues? So let's create a new merge request. Is this one merged? No, okay, the merging it should create a Sidekiq job. It's taking a while. I guess it's a pretty big repo. Interesting, actually. Actually, yeah, that's trace. That's nice. Let's tail Sidekiq. That's interesting. Doesn't seem like the kind of thing we'd expect to see here. So no real logs at all. Let's check. Some jobs from earlier, but that's going to be picking up the job. So if we don't define a catch-all, do we say that in the docs anywhere? What happens? Okay, yeah, we do call it that. You need to have at least one using the catch-all. Okay. That's kind of a foot gun. Something to be aware of for sure. All right, so let's add that back in so our job can run. Okay, so we got that. Yep, now I've got 3 worker processes. Cool. And hopefully this will actually run now. Not though. And here's Sidekiq booting up. It does take a while. Okay, I don't think this is very interesting. So let's move on to the next thing. Is what if you have a legacy config that still has Sidekiq clusters in it? Basically, you're just taking the old Sidekiq cluster config and to remove cluster from it. So now I've got Sidekiq cluster enable equals true and Sidekiq cluster with a couple queue groups. I've gotten rid of the new Sidekiq queue groups option. Okay, so reconfigure again. All right, great. So we can see that we now get a nice message here. Using Sidekiq cluster is now default. Please move your settings over to Sidekiq asterisk config. Configuring Sidekiq cluster will be removed in 14. And then we also, somewhat confusingly, get a message that running Sidekiq directly is deprecated and will be removed in GitLab 14. Please consider using Sidekiq cluster. And then we say that once again, Sidekiq cluster has been deprecated. And then we check GitLab CTL status. Actually, again, okay. You can see that by enabling Sidekiq cluster explicitly, we still get Sidekiq, and now we have Sidekiq cluster as well. So we're running 2 clusters. No, we're actually running legacy Sidekiq again. So now we have what we saw in the other one, which is Sidekiq just with 25 threads there. And then we also have Sidekiq cluster as we configured. But users should get a nice warning when that happens. So hopefully they'll notice that. It's just slightly confusing that you also get told you're running Sidekiq. But other than that, it's basically the same as running normal Sidekiq, or as it was before. So if you look at this config and then compare it to what we have here, I think I have Sidekiq clusters enabled here. Yeah, okay, so it's enabled there. Yeah, so here we got same thing, slightly different arguments showing up. And then we have Sidekiq clusters and the Sidekiq cluster processes. And if you look at the GTL status, Sidekiq cluster. Okay. Anything else I want to go over? I think that's it. Yeah, so Sidekiq clusters, they're convenient. They are good when you have really slow jobs. Just make sure that you add the catch-all when you're updating the config, and if they're using the old config, they'll get warned. I guess that's about it, right? Thanks for watching, everyone. Take it easy.